probably going to put this on the beginning of the video actually instead of the end, because you know what I'm like, I do me filming and this lot, then think of something else, put something on the end. I'm going to put this one at the front, which will completely baffle you until you watch the other bit. The fittings that I've bought that I'm going to show you in the video, people will say, oh well, you could have got that fitting from XYZ or Wish or Etsy or eBay for £1 each and all this lot. Yes, I could. The reason why I went with the store that I did is because they supply fittings and all this lot which have to be basically have to comply with race regulations. They supply stuff for people that build classic racing cars, rally cars, and they are used in anger. So if they can put up with that, they are going to put up with a fat idiot on a ZX10 bimbling around. You know, basically as long as that bike sits at motorway speed safely, I'm happy. Don't care that it can do nearly 170 miles an hour. In my hands it's not going to do it. So that's just a pre-waffle before the main waffle. Cup of tea time. Hello. Right, if you watched the previous video, I was umming and ahhing, thinking we're going to need the ZZR 1100 oil cooler. Well, I did some googly googling last night and it becomes evident we probably couldn't get that to work very easily, and it's just more expensive. You're probably talking £80 for a second-hand oil cooler, and they're all looking a bit scabby by now, and the only other route was to go down the new oil cooler route, which is several £100 or to get a bespoke oil cooler like an Earl's or a Hell or something like that, and again several £100. I mean, you're probably talking £500–600 for a bespoke setup, which is 2 oil lines and a cooler. Fine if you're building a show bike, street fighter or something like that, and you just want to throw money at it, but we're not. I just want a usable machine. Now, when I first got Nibbler and I was recommissioning him, and I thought, right, we need I realised that the exhaust had more holes in it than a Swiss cheese factory, and it just wasn't worth repairing. I had offers to repair it and all this lot, but they never came of anything, and I was sick of waiting. So in the meantime I sourced the V&H, the Vance and Hines, and put that on, and it got me on the road and it got through the MOT and all that lot, and so it did what it needed to do. It gave me a usable machine, but it was far too loud. I mean, we even there's a removable end cap in that, and we welded a baffle in there and it calmed it down considerably, but for me it was still too loud. Standard motorcycles are loud enough, thanks. Got nothing against loud pipes, but you know, not for me, because if I commute on the bike and all this lot, and I work shift systems, and quite often if I get the urge to just go out for a ride, I will start in the early hours of the morning. You know, you can't sleep, just get the bike out, go out. I used to do that quite a lot, but I did notice that when you want to remove the exhaust, obviously you've got to take the radiator off and all this lot, but you could just lower the oil cooler and just let it sit on its lines. The trouble is, when I did that, moving you, these are the original ZX10 lines, and as you can see there's been a little bit of weepage, but when I rested the oil cooler down I heard crispy crunchage, and these are the state of my original lines, and I wasn't happy. So at the time I thought I might have to make some lines up. That was the original plan, because I thought, oh, as soon as I get some oil pressure going through them, or I'm down the road, they're going to fail. Now usually it's the rubber that fails, it's not the fittings unless they're seriously rusted through. But usually, I mean, if they leak, they get a coil, they get a coating of like oil and crap, and then they sort of seal themselves up again, but it's the rubber that normally fails. Now as you can see, these are just overkill. The way they've made these is just overkill. They're double clamped, you know, double crimped either side. You've got hardline fitting either end, but they're barbed. They're just a barbed fitting, or a flanged rather, and then they're double crimped either end, because when the ZX10 came out, it was the top bike in the Kawasaki sports range. Think R1 now or H2 now. That was what the ZX10 was in its day. It wasn't a sports tourer. It was brought out as an all-out sports bike, as was the GP Z900, etc. You had the ZXRs in the mid-range and the low range with the 400 and the 750, which were like the racing classes of the time anyway. But they were built as the top sports bike. They were designed to be down on the pegs and banging off the rev limiters. So for that reason they obviously had oil coolers, because the potential of them being ragged was high. And if you're on the track, ideally you do need an oil cooler, because you're at high revs all the time, you're really punishing that oil in the engine, and it's just a good idea to try and moderate the temperature of it. Good oil temperature is about 85 degrees standard. You know, efficient oil temperature if you like. So that was the plan, and I thought, bugger. So I guessed the size of the banjos and what have you, and I bought ages ago. I mean, when I got the bike, I bought the braided hose, I bought the banjos, crush washers and all that lot, about 50-60 quid's worth, with the intent of obviously replacing the lines or repairing them. And I completely forgot I'd got that hose. So when I was trying to work out the ZZR 1100 oil cooler issue, I realised last night the 1100 is not going to work, because the radiator, for a start, on a ZZR 1100, they curved it to make it more efficient. It's more surface area, so it cools better. And also they must have been working on the oil cooling, because they dropped half a litre in oil capacity, which generally shows more efficiency. So I had a look at the microfiches, I had a look at the mounting systems, and I don't think there's any neat way that we can make it work on a ZX10, not me anyway. I mean, if you've got a bit of metal craftsmanship, etc., or even more skill in your little finger than I've got in my entire body, which is not difficult, you could probably make it work. But I had the other thought: we don't really need an oil cooler, not in this country, not in Britain, not with our climate. In America, Australia, Japan, obviously their summers get way hotter than ours. The summer we had this year was just unprecedented. It is what it is. But we're still not in the territory of requiring an oil cooler. When I used to run grey import bikes, the Japanese home market bikes would all have oil coolers, because of the Japanese summers are effing hot. But the UK spec of that bike, like a VFR, didn't have oil coolers. So I think we can safely do away with it. It's a very low pressure system. We're not messing around with any high pressure stuff. So what I did, I googled oil line kits and stuff like that, and what came up was Merlin Motorsport at Castle Combe race circuit in the Wiltcestershire, and they're a bit like a Demon Tweaks. And so I had a look, and I purchased, bear in mind I've had this a while, I purchased half a metre of 8mm braided oil line. I'm sure it's 8mm. I can't find the original sales receipt, but I'm pretty sure it's 8mm. And I purchased 4 banjos and associated crushing washers. And as luck would have it, this is the double feed bolt from the front of ZZR 11, but it's the same gauge as a single length bolt on the ZX10. And as luck would have it, Uncle Jimmy got the right size, and I'm sure it's an M12. Pretty sure it's an M12. You're gonna have to do your own homework on that, because I'm sure it's an M12. Anyway, I've took some screenshots of the Merlin Motorsports website, of the hose and of the banjos. For the banjos you need to go into, I think it's like adapters and fittings in the oil section, because there's loads. They've got all the Goodrich stuff. If you wanted to get really blingy, and you know, these were like £6 before tax on their own, these big banjos, and they're still but if you wanted to make up a line with Goodrich or something like that, you're talking 20-30 quid for each fitting. This is why Goodrich hosing is fucking expensive. And the hose itself was probably only about 7 quid before tax, braided. And what we can do, the idea I've had is, this is on the ZX10, how the cooler lines mount. Obviously you've got one at the front there, goes to the cooler, and you've got your other one that comes from there, the long line. On the ZZR, let's just do a Blue Peter and move this out of the way. Hi, thank you. Let's just move that out of the way, and let's get these scabby horrible lines out of the way, and we will look at the spare ZZR 1100. If somebody wants to repair it, they can do. Right, so you'll notice on this the front fitting isn't there anymore. That fitting's the same, but the front fitting they moved, because obviously there was an extra line put on the ZZR 1100 to the inner sprocket cover, which we don't need. I can't see the point of opening up that line or taking the sprocket cover off for an extra oil feed, because I don't think it's necessary. So the idea is I am going to bypass the cooler. I'm tempted to make up a pair of lines out of that, using the long hard section of that, but that line's gonna take a lot of clearing up. It don't look as nice as this, but the idea is one there, and we'll orientate it in such a fashion there so it doesn't foul anything like the drain plug, and just put a bypass line in. So I think that's what I'll do. So I'll put the link up to your Merlin Motorsports, and I'll show the pages of the hose. But all in, that was about 50 quid. Which you think, make 50 quid? I certainly did at the time. But then when I started doing the research, for a used oil cooler on a ZZR, you're probably talking £80 for one with unknown integrity. If you want, you could get, I mean, if you were building a show bike, Street Fighter or whatever, and you wanted to put like an Earl's cooler on, or a Hell cooler or something like that, for a kit, you're probably talking 500-600 quid. And I can't justify that. As much as it would look great, I can't justify it. So I think that's the route we're going to go down. So when I make the hose up and what have you, we'll have another video. See you later, guys. Hello. By now, hopefully you've watched part 1 of the Making the Oil Line series. Right, this braided hose, basically you can just pull out the braid. Be very gentle with it, because the braid crushes easy. It's meant for anti-abrasion, not anti-crush. So we've just took the sleeve off, and then what we're going to work out is, I'm going to get one of my banjos. Now, this is, I'm doing a mock-up at the minute. When I actually make the line up for real, I will obviously be putting the proper hose clamps on and all this like. So I'm going to put the braid back on, but braid frays. You need to like cut it with tin snips, and then you always get frayed ends on it. It looks untidy, but a Jubilee clip or something will tidy it up. I'm not going to buy the arty-farty foot width fittings, because it's then pretending you're trying to make it look like a, you know, 40-50 quid's worth of Goodrich fittings and stuff like that, and it's not about that. So lubricate me end. Oh, that's going to really piss some people off. Ram it in. You can actually dip, I might have to actually, because it's effing cold in the shed, is you can actually dip your hose in boiling water, hot water, soften it up, and I might have to actually, because that ain't going in. So yeah, so I'll do that. I will get some warm water and we'll come back. Yes, it never goes to plan. Lovely. That's gone on better. I've just I've dipped it in some rather hot, not boiling water, and then we're just going to shove it onto the fitting. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned in the other video that these barb fittings, a lot of people say, oh, because they're barbed you don't need a Jubilee clip on them, because the type of people that usually, you know, race classic cars or build classic race cars, they've normally got adenoids. They've normally got a nice grey beard and adenoids. Oh yes, I remember the Riley 1450 injection turbo special. This is a Marley 1.8. You know what I mean. And of course this is a one-off. They're shot stoppage. They're nice people and they know more than you do, which isn't difficult. So anyway, I'm just trying to work out what kind of lengthage I'll need when I can get this bolt in. I'm using the double length bolt. Obviously I'm going to be using the old oil cooler bolts off the ZX. So we've got that there. I don't know whether you can see, but let's put you there, which you can probably see less, but you know, it's in bullshit town it can look like I'm looking after you. So if I can route it like that, miss the drain plug, and then that header feed comes in, I don't think that's going to go in the way, but if we can do that, I think if we chop that line about there, I think we'll be laughing. Yes folks, I'm not normally allowed sharp objects. Bit of an in-joke that is. And the whole bench is vibrating. This is not the sharpest knife I have, it's just one that was to hand, shall we say. We'll get in there. We'll get in there. See, I'm old and weak. We've only got a little bit to go. I'm kitten weak these days. There we go. If we go there, let's get the other double bolt. There's the other double bolt. Here's the other double bolt. Let's just whack that in there and see if we're about there. Now, before I shove this on the end, I'm going to get a couple of Jubilees. I'm going to put the braid back on. I cut the braid with tin snips because it generally makes short work of it. Or what you could do is, when the chief female of the house is out, or the chief male, whatever, depends what kind of relationship you've got, use the best household scissors to cut braiding. You'll be really popular. So anyway, twat, let's see where we are then. Yeah, I think that's going to work. I can even take a little bit more off if I want. But there you go. One bypass hose. And I've got more if I need it. So yeah, I think that'll work. So that's where we are, boys and girls. Yeah. So I suppose the next job is to cut the braid. Ideally, measure what length braid you want, put a bit of tape over the end, and then cut it through the tape, and the tape will stop it from fraying. So yeah, sorted. I am just pre-warning you. I'm now going to attempt to cut the braid with my tin snips. The good thing about it is, if we fuck this up, we've got enough spare hose and we've got enough braid to do it again. Hopefully we won't have to, but you know what I'm like. It is cutting it, but because it's not like a solid piece of metal, it's loads of little strands. I might even be better off with like a Dremel disc or something like that. That's not doing it. Well, it is doing it, but it's not done it very well. I will return shortly. That's tin snips and the best house scissors. I'm giving up on the braid. I don't need it. Nobody's going to see it. It's at the bottom of the bike. Fuck it off. Right, I've just got to go and find a couple of Jubilee clips, and then we can shove it on the other end. Nice. Give you some idea. Obviously, we're going to use the old ZX10 oil cooler fittings, single length. These aren't clamped down fully, just in case I just need to tweak the unions at the end. But I think that'll work. So there you go. One bypass hose made, and potentially 100+ quid saved. Now, if I would have thought about doing this before, I bought the ZZR 1100 oil lines and stuff like that, you could have saved even more money. But to be honest, until you start to experiment with stuff like this, you don't know what's going to work and not what isn't going to work. That's going to work, pretty sure of that, and it's a neat little solution. You're not going to see it, but yeah, I'm happy with that. Nice.